we all live this book of life. And every chapter that we're in lead us to the next. And not everything or everyone comes with us into the next chapter, but it's going to be a heck of a book when it's done.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Blah, Blah, Blah Something Wellness Podcast. We are going even deeper into retirement realities, and we have a really fun, awesome group today. Some new faces to the podcast besides Chris, that guy, my partner in all things. So I am your host, Tami Sharp, and I'm going to let Chris introduce himself really quick, and then we will have the rest of you introduce yourselves. So Chris, take it away.
Yeah. Chris Zamora. I get partners with you in law enforcement coaching and in life. 23-year veteran with the police department in a local agency in the state of Arizona. And that's pretty much it about me. I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. We will, ladies first. Angela, will you please introduce yourself, and then we'll have the gentleman.
Yes, of course. I'm Angela Harrolle. I actually come from a law enforcement background as well. I spent nearly 10 years as a special agent with the federal government. Left there and became an advocate for public safety, running a nonprofit here for almost a decade, actually more than a decade, in Arizona, helping all of our police, firefighters, and first responders on all levels.
Mark Rendahl, and I spent 28 years in law enforcement in a little town in Southern California, and then retired in 2014. And we relocated out here to Arizona, and I picked back up into working in law enforcement, but in a civilian capacity for an agency out here doing background investigations. So kind of sums up my history.
And your background is an authentic Arizona background. That's what we have here.
Exactly. Right?
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Paul.
I'm Paul Pantani. I spent just shy of 35 years in law enforcement, all in Southern California. Finished out my career with the DA's office. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. I worked a city agency, and then I worked half my career, almost literally half and half, between a city police department and a district attorney's office. I run a podcast. Well, I retired at the end of 2023. I started a podcast in 2021 where I talk to veterans and first responders about their transitions from these careers. So that and some side work has been keeping me busy since retirement.
Awesome. And I'll drop the link. You can self-promote. I don't care. But I will drop the link for your podcast as well in the description for this Transition Drill, so you guys can check that out. Shameless self-promotion, but Chris and I have also been guests on that. So we will, plug those episodes in there as well. So as we get into this topic, before we get too thick into the weeds, I want to go back to the beginning of your guys' career. That's kind of the theme of this month with the retirement realities. When you guys were new into the law enforcement world, one, did you receive any kind of training, any kind of awareness, or anything of like, hey, you might want to pay attention? Or did you have awareness of how important it was to plan for retirement when you were all babies?
That's a good question, Tammy. I think that, when you get into this career young, like I did, I was 22, 23 years old, and that's the last thing on your mind is retirement. You're just starting out, right? I mean, and then back then the agencies really never talked about, there was nothing up front about, hey, you need to start planning for this long career and have some plans for when you leave. And so that reality never really hit me. For me personally, I'd probably say maybe 10 to 15 years into my career is when I really started, it clicked, because life changes happened. I had gotten divorced and remarried, and now you're collecting debt, and things are happening where you're going, I should probably have a plan when I retire and think about what this is going to look like, right? If it would have happened earlier, would it have changed things? I don't know. I mean, but for me, it clicked in, and the rest of the remainder of my career was spent thinking about, okay, you got to have a plan when you leave this job, because you're going to be leaving at a relatively young age, and sitting on the sofa playing PlayStation is not going to be a plan for retirement like a lot of young guys think, you know.
I'll add to it by agreeing. Yes. When I first started, it was, when I look back on it, there wasn't a big group of formers who had retired and gone on to do something else. It seemed like at that time, and so I came on the job in 92. It seemed like most of the guys at that time would retire and just be retired. They might do a little, maybe some PI work, something meaningless, so to speak. And there was not a lot of conversations either directed at me or that I was part of where there was talk of preparation or thought beyond retirement. I think I also came from a generation where you didn't really talk about post-retirement. You just did your job. And then at the end, you figured out what life was going to be. And it was still a large group of guys who retirement was their plan. I'm going to retire. I'm going to travel. I'm going to get the motorhome, whatever it was. So I think it's a combination of a change in generations, a change in financial status. Things are more expensive today. People don't make as smart of financial decisions anymore. So that when you do retire, there's almost the mandatory need to go on and do more.
Yeah.
I don't think people know any different. They just have to go on and do more. My experience is a little unique in that I was barely of legal drinking age when I became a special agent. And because of the foreign aspect of it and working at different embassies and being overseas, we had a lot of discussion around, taxes and what is your state of domicile and moving and those kind of components. But we never really thought about retirement. And they're like, oh, you need to join this organization over here because they have resources or something. But that was it. That was the end all be all. And I've had two interesting different careers. But leaving that career, you talked about having a plan. Like, what's your plan? Well, you can plan with the best of them. And then sometimes life goes sideways. And at the end of my career with the federal government, my husband, who was a police officer, paramedic, and a firefighter here in Arizona, unfortunately was killed in the line of duty. And at that point, the agency I worked for was very supportive. They said, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? How can we help? Because I happened to be in Arizona at the time. And I said, I'm not ready to go. I think I just want to stay here and lean into the community. So the easiest segue for me was to do something that Mark's doing right now, was to do background investigation. So I went as a contract background investigator, and I held that role until nearly 2 years ago, because why? We have trouble cutting the cord, right? We all have trouble cutting the cord. You want to stay involved, you want to stay plugged in just a little bit. And anyway, they finally came to me and said, and you're doing like 2 a year. Are you sure you really want to do this? And I took 2 weeks to figure out that the only real benefit for that in my life was a hotel discount. So I decided to just mail in my credentials. And when I did that, it was the most anticlimactic experience I think I've ever had. They're like, okay, so what do you think? I go, yeah, I'm going to pass. They're like, okay, we'll send you a FedEx. I said, perfect. Put them in. Never heard another thing. Never heard another thing. And fascinating, after spending more than basically 22 years dedicated to that agency in one aspect or another, just nothing. But prior to that pseudo-retirement, I entered another career, again, helping Arizona's public safety here, whether it's police, fire, like I said, runs the whole gamut, every single part of the state. And interesting, we look at, in the law enforcement world, fire world, celebrations are a big thing. You've mentioned this in a previous podcast, and basically honoring those services, honoring that sacrifice. We were going to a retirement all the time, which is a beautiful thing. And you got to see people with plans, maybe no plan. Maybe just don't talk to me. I want to be in a rocking chair on a cabin porch up in, northern Arizona. Okay, fine, you do you. But the reality is even those that are dedicated to supporting first responders, that segue is also quiet. It is also part of, I think, the pride that everyone in law enforcement feels. Like, we don't want the attention, we don't want any of this, but you have to have a plan. There has to be some sort of plan and integration into other parts of your life in order to be successful.
Louder for those in the back. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
And I want Chris to share his story really quick. And then I want to talk about, the crickets after retirement. We'll just kind of, because we have talked about a lot of things in the other episodes, we've unpacked a lot. So I do want to talk about the crickets that come after and just the lack of, woo. So Chris, share your start in the career when it came to thinking about retirement.
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't think about retirement because I was so immersed in my career. I'm a cop now, right? And I loved it. And that's all I ate, slept, dreamed, policing, and that was it. Retirement, that's for old people. That's not for me, right? And so my 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 retirement was my pension. Like, once I retire, I'm going to get my pension. That's my retirement plan. And I think a lot of us think this way early in our careers. And we don't really see what, the back end, what's happening, because early in my career, the veterans who were on the cusp of retirement, they would joke in front of us youngsters and say, when I retire, I'm going to go become a doorman at Walmart. And we would ask, well, why? Because they don't have to think, right? Do you know how many of those retirees became doormen at Walmart? Zero. None of them. Why? Because you got to have passion and purpose after retirement, whatever that might be. And they saw that. So, but having that mindset, listening to the veterans, I'm like, okay, maybe that's what I'll do eventually sometime, is go become a doorman at Walmart like everybody else, right? And throughout the years, though, obviously I wisened up. But yeah, I think we have to, especially if those young officers, first year officers that are listening to this episode, plan for retirement, plan for what are you going to do? Let's say you don't reach 20 years, but you take a medical retirement because you got injured. Now, what's your backup plan, right? And nobody ever thinks that way because we don't think that we're going to get injured, right? And so you got to have some kind of planning throughout your career. I don't care if you're still in the academy or you're 1 year on or 20 years, have a plan. Because I think towards the end of my career, well, actually, I never even thought about retiring until my 18th year in. When a friend of mine who was a sex crimes detective, she came up to me and she said, what are you going to do after you retire? And I thought that was such a weird question to ask because I hadn't even thought about retirement. She goes, well, you've only got 2 years left and then you can retire. And when she brought that up to me, it scared me. It really, a fear came over me, like, what am I going to do after I retire? Because I hadn't thought about it. And now I'm 18 years into it. And that's what got me to go back to school to become a clinical hypnotherapist and a life coach. But, and then that spiraled into law enforcement coaching. So, in a way, I kind of stumbled into this in a weird way because somebody brought it to my attention. Art?
I was going to say that's everything you said there, Chris. It just resonates. And one of the things, that famous quote that Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And what I mean and how that applies, I think, in this scenario is even if you have a plan, like let's say 15 years into your career, I'm going to hit the 25-year mark, and then I'm going to do A, B, and C. Well, plans could change. So all of a sudden something, whether it be a family member gets injured, or you get sick yourself, or something comes up where the plan that you may have had for retirement, guess what? Now you got to pivot and you've got to do something different. So I feel like to all the youngsters out there, if you're gonna, yes, have a plan, but also have a plan B, maybe even a plan C, or learn to be flexible, because that's what you've done your whole career in law enforcement, is you've been flexible, you've learned to adapt. And I'd say that in the years that I've been retired, I've had to pivot a few times because, yes, I took the first 2 years and completely retired, right? My wife and I traveled, we did all the fun things, but she being my junior, she's still working, and let's face it, she's the breadwinner. So, she can't stop working. So and of course I got bored and I went back to work because, you got to keep this thing working. And so my plan, I'll go to work the Walmart greeter, right? I did a bartending gig for a little bit. I worked at REI, so I get discounts on my mountain bike parts and all that. And you know what was funny for me is that I realized I don't want brainless work. I don't want mindless work, retail. It, that didn't satisfy my need. And so the whole definition of retirement, that's a weird word because when you think about, people think retirement mean you're just not going to work anymore. You're just going to be a stay-at-home, grandpa or whatever it may be. And that term, we've all heard it. I failed retirement, went back to work. I don't I don't like that term because I found a niche coming, working backgrounds now. This is something I feel like I could do. Here I am, I'm 62. I could do it until I'm 70, probably even my early 70s, and I found my, I don't say my home, but I'm back in my niche, and it took a little bit of trial and error during the first few years of retirement. But once you find that, that wasn't my plan. I'm like, oh, I'll never get back into law enforcement. Well, guess what, folks? It happens.
You
So
found your people.
100%. And that was the thing. And I hate to use this term, working at REI and working around the dope smoking rock climbers, right? I mean, great.
Sure.
However, I was more like their dad than their coworker. And they weren't my people, and you guys all can relate. And everybody listening to this podcast that has any sort of law enforcement experience or military, you get, it's like being part of the culture, being part of the group, you know what I'm saying? And that's what I needed to be. I needed to be belonging back into that group again. So, that's my story. But
No, and the being around your people, that's such an important part. Because one of the things Chris and I both like with the holistic wellness space and all the stuff that we do, like I always say, I love my healing arts community and I can go hang out. I can go hang out at a drum circle. I can go hang out, but that's not my natural group of people. That's not who I gravitate. And I don't see eye to eye with everybody. This is where we feel comfortable. This is what we know and can have those conversations, especially we don't smoke weed. We don't really, he doesn't drink. I have my occasional mom wine, but we don't drink. We don't party. We don't do that. And so it's like, okay, who are we surrounding ourselves with? Right. I also wanted to touch on something that you said too, that change. And I always say, be bamboo, be flexible like bamboo. Don't just be a big tree that can just break. Be bamboo and bend with the wind, even before you retire. Within the career, your mindset while you're still active is also setting you up for retirement. So we see a lot right now, times are kind of hard, or well, not kind of hard. They're very hard for law enforcement. And because departments are so short staffed, you have a lot of people that are being pulled from different positions and put back on patrol because we have to have people on the street. And a lot of time you get pissed, just like, I don't want to go back to patrol. And departments end up treating patrol like punishment, like, oh, I'm going to put you back on patrol. It's like, well, that's shitty. How does that make the patrol feel? At one point, you couldn't wait to get onto patrol. Now you're like, oh, I have to go back. So throughout the career, being able to pivot and just be like, okay, this is what Chris has done that. And he took lessons from going back to patrol of like, that actually makes you a better cop. It makes you better in the specialty because you're going back, you're kind of touching base of like, what's going on now? Where's the technology? What's going on with the way it is on the street? I hear one of the complaints all the time from chiefs or from patrol about chiefs is that they're so disconnected from what's going on the street, right? So just having that mindset when you're going through your career of, okay, it's a pivot point. Is it forever? Not necessarily. And having that bamboo type mindset is going to help you when you retire because it's like, okay, what's next? What's next? If all that makes sense. And I want to throw one more thing in there too. I've been meaning to say this in the other episodes and I haven't got to it, but the term retired, like you said, it makes you feel old. And like a lot of people in law enforcement are retiring very young. And I even realized so I went to Chris's retirement and then we started going into this cycle of retirements and we kept going to retirement parties. And it took me a second to be like, hold on, these aren't my parents' friends. This is our friend. When did we get here? How old are we? Hold on a second. But shifting that mindset, well, I know there's a few people that I've talked to. It would be so amazing if law enforcement changed it from retiree to alumni. And it's just a different mindset. What, you're not, Paul? You got, come at me, bro. What you got?
Me personally, I think retiree is a badge of honor to wear. You made it to the end of your career. Alumni just means you graduated from college. You you met the minimum requirements to get the piece of paper on the wall, so you're an alumni. Doesn't mean you really accomplished anything. I actually think it means a lot to have the term retiree. I want to go back real quick, and if we're talking to those younger officers, something that I would say to think about right now. Yes, every one of us has talked about the same thing. When you're young and you're starting your career, you're drinking from that fire hose. Retirement is the absolute last thing you're thinking about. Your life situation doesn't put you in a position to think about retirement. You haven't started a family. You haven't got kids. You haven't had enough laps around the sun to where the finish line is actually starting to come into view. And now you got to start thinking, damn, retirement's coming. What you will also experience, and I guarantee this, when you eventually walk away from this career or these careers, you will be a used to be. And as much as you want to think that you're going to stay connected to all the buddies and the friends and everything else that you had with your organization, it's going to go away. That train is going to keep moving at 100 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. So where I'm going with this is going back to being that young officer. There are senior members that you're working with right now that I'm sure you connect with on a level. You get along well with them. You really like them. When they retire, here's a twofold thing. Stay in contact with them. One, it gives them an anchor point back to the organization. Reach out to them. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Keep them updated on what's going on at the organization. The flip side, it now gives you an information point of what it's like to be retired. What experiences they're experiencing. Are they enjoying their retirement? Did they make the bad decision? I know for me, one of the stories that always sticks out in my head was one of the senior guys that I worked with, and I came, again, said Southern California, came to his retirement. His wife found a very small little city, Minden, Nevada. If you've not been through it, it's been over 20 years since I've been there. It's a postage stamp little town. Something in her mind hit that that's where she wanted to retire to. They sold everything lock, stock, and barrel. They bought a house there. 6 months later, she's like, yeah, this ain't working. I want to go back. And he's like, we've priced ourselves out of Southern California. We can't go back. Yeah. But what I'm getting at is from the young officer, if you stay in contact with those men and women who retire, you're doing two things. One, you're gaining information yourself, but you're giving them an anchor point to stay connected with that organization also.
Mm-hmm. I like your reference about the move that they made, that they committed to that. And going back to also what Tami said, be bamboo, right? Be flexible in this and that. And bamboo is not the same as a big stalk, a big tree. But the reality is you're also a tree. You're not a tree. Move. Try it. You go and you try something and it doesn't work. Try something new. Rather than retiree, I'm a big fan of the mid-career sabbatical. Maybe this is just the launch into whatever you find, but take the time to reflect and then go in whatever direction you want. You're at a place in life where you can want to, not have to. That's a gift.
Want to, not have to is huge.
Yes.
That is huge. That's the thing is coming to work every day for me now is I'm coming to work because I want to.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to. Yes, I'm building a second retirement, but that's all that's in the back of my mind. It's not, I'm already, dare I say, financially secure, and we're at a place in our life where we're comfortable. So for me, coming to work is not stressful. Even my coworkers who I'm surrounded with who may have experienced stress at the agency, I don't feel it because I don't let it bother me. I'm at a place where, like Angela said, I'm there because I want to be, and that's I can't explain that to anybody unless you've experienced it, and that day will come.
And Mark, you're right. I think some of the beauty in that really is simply, you know what? You choose to do this. You want to do this. It doesn't, the proverbial saying is if you find something you love to do, you'll never work another day in your life. And there you are on a beach, right? And just enjoying life and making the most of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, the want to choose to, one of the things that Chris and I teach people is a very small reframe. I have to go to work. No, you don't. You get to go to work. You choose to go to work. And if you wake up in the morning and you say, I get to go to work, it's a shit show, but I still get to. I get to go get a paycheck. I get to go possibly help somebody for the better. Yes, you may have to deal with some inner stuff that's going on. You don't have to do that. You can say you're sitting there and you have maybe you're at your 18 and you have a couple years left and you're like, well, I have to stay in the job because I have to get my pension. I have to. Oh, that would be a key indicator. If you're absolutely miserable, and I get it, it's hard right now. It is rough. You guys have everything working against you. And that's when you reach out to a mental health professional, a coach, a mentor, the retired community, because the retired community is going to be like, it's almost like, well, I'm talking to the wrong audience. Angela would get this. I was going to say, when women give birth, it's the most painful experience a human can go through. And then there's a sort of amnesia. And we're like, let's do it again. That was fun. For some.
Yeah.
For when you go through the pain,
Can I counter that?
we're gonna
I bumped my toe once, and that was pretty painful.
Let me put it in this perspective. For the men on the panel, we've all had our gonads struck at some point in time. No man ever goes, you know what? I want to do that again.
Yeah. And that's why we have the children. Yes.
Right.
Yes, Paul, you're correct.
My point was that after you get through the retirement, there's like a little bit of amnesia. If you talk to the retirees, for the most part, the mentally balanced, the ones that have checked in, done the inner work, have sought out whatever, they're going to be like, hey, you know what? You can stick it out. You can do this, or it might not be worth sticking out. Again, you don't have to. Go meet with a financial advisor. Again, I'm going to throw you back to last month's money mindset topic. Go watch all of those episodes. There's a lot of financial wisdom in there. See where you're at financially and what is going to be in the best interest overall long term, not reactive because you're in a place of burnout and you're frustrated, because everything you're going through is temporary. For better or for worse, it's temporary. It's going to evolve. So there.
Can I add something to that?
Of course you can.
I would also say, if you're at that point, you're close to your retirement, but you just feel like you're at the end of your rope, I would strongly recommend you take a step back and look at every aspect of your life. It may just be where you're manifesting your frustrations at the work aspect. You might be completely unhappy with other parts of your life, but it's easy to blame the job. Just my 2 cents.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Chris, you got something?
Yeah, it's all about mindset. Like Mark, you have a very positive mindset. The entire time I've worked with you, you were always Mr. Positive. You could be out in 100+ degree weather, taking an accident report, and you always had a smile on your face, very positive. And for me, I'm like, what's this guy's problem? Why is he always so happy? Right? We're all standing in the same hot intersection, right? But it came down to your mindset. You see, yours is more positive. You look at the positive things, whereas mine at that time, I was disgruntled, I was angry, and so what did I focus on? My subconscious. I'm going to get into the hypno side of things. My subconscious was so focused on negative. I'd wake up and I'd say, I hate my job. People are jerks. That's how I thought, right? How many cops out there think that way when they first wake up having to go into work? The problem with that, at the subconscious level, you see, our subconscious doesn't want to make us into liars. So when you say, I hate my job, people are jerks, my subconscious hears it and says, oh, you got to find everything during Chris's shift to make that statement true, because I don't want to make him into a liar. Because if you think about it, we're all cops here, we're law enforcement. Lying, we don't hang out with liars. We don't like to be accused of being a liar, right? It's all about integrity. So it makes that subconscious even more powerful. Ooh, I don't want to make this person into a liar. So I'm going to look for everything to make that statement true. And if I do 10 traffic stops in one shift, 9 of those stops are very positive, but that one traffic stop, that person gives me an attitude, so they're going to file a complaint. They'll see me in court. Who now becomes representative of my shift? That one negative traffic stop. Why? Because I set myself up for failure. I said, I hate my job. People are jerks. So now I focused on that. I delete all those positive contacts with the public. So we have to be very mindful how we go and how our thought process, right? Mark, you started a second career. To you, that was great. You didn't even think about retirement for your second career because why? You're in the present moment, right? You're not thinking about the future in that I need so many years before I retire. If you start focusing on retirement, how many of us have a countdown clock somewhere in our subconscious that's going off until we get to retirement? If you do that, be very mindful that you might be creating undue stress on yourself, right? How long have we been talking here in conversation? About 30 minutes? 30 minutes went by pretty fast. But if I said, hey, get an old school clock with the second hand, the seconds that go, and I want you to just stare at it for 30 minutes. How long is that going to be? It's going to take forever, right?
Unity.
Why? Because we're just focusing on this. And this is what you're doing when you put up those countdown clocks. It's going to make retirement even further away versus be like Mark, be in the present moment, enjoy the men and women that you work with, enjoy that you're helping people with a very meaningful career. Before you know it, holy shit, 20 years is already here and I'm going to retire. It went, and it can go by that fast.
What a great compliment that you paid to Mark. And Mark, I mean, just to be referred to as positive, always have been positive. I mean, how beautiful is that? Because at the end of the day, it's about passion and purpose and positivity and attitude, no matter where you are, whether you're still in your career or you're moving on to something else. And that's one thing on the podcast that I co-host, Move the Needle. It's like, what are you doing to move the needle? What are you doing to make it better, either for others or for yourself? Don't just stay stuck. And I hear people talk about that countdown clock, Chris, like you said. I mean, you've got the retirement thing on your phone, or whether it's on your computer, or your wife bought you a clock, whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. The reality is you've made it a sentence. You've made it a sentence that you have to fulfill versus just wanting to and trying to figure out how to move the needle in the process to make it better for you, for starters, so that way it can have a ripple effect with your family, in your profession, and just personally.
I love it.
Angela. Go ahead. Go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to add to that obviously the tail end of all of our careers, we started hearing the moaning about the millennial generation and now the Gen Z generation. Really, though, when you stop and think about it, they're actually going to do so much positive for these careers. Angela made the perfect comment. We look at it as a sentence. Those of us from our generation, you signed on the dotted line, you put that piece of paper away, and you opened up the file cabinet 20 years, 30 years later when you could retire. You never thought about leaving. You never thought about doing anything else. This is what I signed up for. The younger people coming into these careers, they're not going to let it ruin their life. They're not going to let it ruin them as a person. If today they might be 10 years into it and they go, this is not feeding me anymore, they've got no problem. Hey, I'm checking out. I'm going to go do something else, because how I feel inside is a whole lot more important than that pension check. And I think that's going to be a positive change for this career and this world in the grand scheme of things. Is they're going to start showing us these are just jobs. And if today or tomorrow it's really the job that you're no longer feeling, walk away from it.
Yeah. Amen.
That's so true. And to back up a minute, what Angela, when you kind of touched on this about the responsibility of being of your happiness. I can't tell you how many times during my career that you hear these guys talking about what's the department going to do for me? They feel this, they feel that the department needs to make them happy.
Mhm.
And that to me is the most toxic and dangerous mindset to have, that you're putting the responsibility for your happiness on the agency, on the department, or to even take it outside of law enforcement. Because if you carry that with you, first of all, you're going to burn out really fast, because it's not the department's responsibility to make you happy. And if that day comes that you retire, is guess what? You're just another name. You retire, and if you've gone through that 30-year career of that mindset, well, the department should have been making me happy. They're responsible for my happiness. Then you retire, the department's not there. Where's your happiness going to come from? So I urge all of you, look inwards, and your happiness has to come from within yourself, with your spouse, your family, your family network, and on top of that, real quick, is having a circle of friends outside of law enforcement. We
Yes.
talked about it earlier about having that clique and having our group, and that's all well and good. But I just think that if you can have a circle of friends outside of law enforcement, that is one of the healthiest things that you can do for yourself when you go into retirement, because that makes the separation from the career a little bit easier. I'm here to tell you.
You know, you talked a little bit about that generational shift, and it's happening on different levels. And I remember being at IACP, this was maybe last year or 2 years ago, and I went into a session and there were people just walking up to a mic, and there was a panel of chiefs up there and they're asking questions. And somebody walked up and said, "What does your wellness program look like?"
Mm.
And there was a lot of snarking and, chuckling in the audience, and somebody else, "Drop and give me 20." That was their wellness program. And then, but what was evidenced by that was that true generational shift. What are you going to do for me? And or also that mental state, like, hey, I am going to protect me first. I want to make sure there are resources. I know I'm going into a career that's going to be hard. There are going to be good days, there are going to be bad days. And when they're bad, they're really bad. So making sure that generationally, those that are a little more seasoned, those salty dogs, or those that are brand new that are just like, oh, I can do what he's doing or she's doing, making sure that they figure out how to overlap. As you also referenced earlier, if you're a young officer and you have someone that you walk through this retirement with, stay in touch, because it is the pulse on both sides of that generation. And I think that's how we can help bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the generation gap, you guys touched on it. This new generation, they're really good at putting themselves first. They're really good at going and talking to a mental health professional. Whereas our generation, we're told, don't ever share your feelings and emotions because that's career suicide. You're probably going to get fired, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So for the agencies that are watching this, that new generation, because we've already heard complaints about the new generation. The new generation doesn't like to stay late. They don't like to come in when they're needed. They'd rather go home. They'd rather do this or away from the PD. Great. That's awesome. Do you know how long we've been trying to get Gen Z to do that? And now we finally have a generation that gets it. They understand it. But at the same time, though, the new generation also has to understand there are going to be times where you're going to have to stay late. There are going to be times where you might have to be a little bit more invested at work. But if you maintain that hierarchy of me first, my family next, and then my career, you can always go back to that. That should be the norm, right? Knowing there are going to be some times when you got to put the career first, right? Like if you get off at 3 p.m. and you got to go pick up your kid at daycare, but that last hour of shift, you get an in custody DV with strangulation, and now you're going to be booking somebody, taking a victim to go get forensically examined. You're not going to get off at 3, right? So you have to have backup plans, and don't allow that to ruin your day because of that, right? Because millennials, that will happen to them, or even the Z generation, right? If they don't go home on time, they can totally crush them. So be prepared. You got to have a little bit of both, just like our generation, Gen Xers, take some time off, take some time for yourself, right? So we got to have both sides of the argument, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, and for the departments too, as a leadership, I mean, we all hear all of these recruitment and retention issues. There's recruitment and retention. Well, like you guys just said, the younger generation, one of the negatives that we hear from departments is, oh, the younger generation, they're not resilient. They're weak. They're lazy. No, they're actually very resilient. They are putting their wellness first. And like Angela said, they are asking those questions. Now, the thing is, we're all in the wellness space for law enforcement, and we know it can be very frustrating because we are all saying the same thing. Now we have full-on wellness conferences. There's more volume and everything. And now the question is, okay, well, can anybody even define wellness? You guys are throwing it out. Everybody's title of their conference presentation is something, something, something wellness, but nobody can actually tell you what it is. We're still looking at the problem, not the solutions. And there's a lot of noise in the space. And then we still have departments that are just hell-bent on not getting it. Where it's like, we have EAP. First question that Chris and I ask when we hear that from command staff is, great, I'm in crisis. What do I do? What's the number? Where do I go? And we get blank stares more time than not, being like, well, and then they have to go look it up. They don't know immediately how to get resources for their people, or they have one resource. That's it. We have a mental health provider on site. Great. This officer doesn't like that person. What else you got? So you have to have a full, that's the younger generation. I hate to break it to you. The older generation is like, what do you mean they're doing yoga and vegan and all of those? We make fun of it, but they are. They are more health conscious, health minded, and that is not a bad thing. It's kind of like everybody's looking at one of those pictures where it's like, depending on where you're standing, everybody's looking at the same thing, but it looks different. At the end, we all have the same goal, but we have different communication styles about how to actually get there. So conversations like this are so important to have. And I honestly, I love that Paul pushes back. I love the pushback, like, because Chris and I do that. Anything that Chris and I create that comes out to the public, I promise you, we've had behind the scenes, can't say that, can't do that. Why would you say that? Why we spin the Rubik's Cube, because that's the reality. What's going to work for one of us on this panel is not going to work for the other when it comes to wellness. So can you define wellness? I just watched a friend of mine put that question out on their Instagram story, and I looked at the answer. I'm like, you can't define wellness because everybody has a different definition for what it is for you. The main point is to actually be doing something, take action. The departments need to lean into more of the conversation. And I kind of want to shift this a little bit because Angela knows what specifically with the work that you were doing. The suicide rate, what we talk about this, we all talk about the suicide rate. We don't talk about what the statistics are for how many of those are the retired community. And the reality is statistics are bullshit because it's what gets reported versus what's real out there. And so that's where we come back. I'm bringing it back around to the crickets and that quietness. It's just like after you lose somebody, when you go through a death, there's a lot of noise within the first couple weeks. You're in shock, you're in process. There's the funeral, people are checking in, they're bringing you casseroles. And then after the funeral, you get a couple friends that check in. And then within about 6 months, it's quiet. It's very, very quiet. And it's even more quiet at night when you sit there and you're just in the thoughts of it. So when we're telling the audience, you need to have that mentor, you need to be checking in, have the younger person, have that person. Something that Chris and I teach in our training is who is the person that you can call at 3 a.m. that's going to answer? Who's going to be there when you're in your retirement phase and you're like, hey, I sitting on a tropical island, but I'm not actually happy, right? So for you guys after retirement, in those quiet moments, or Angela too, with your story, with your grief and everything, in those really quiet moments, what did you find that helped you, one, have the self-awareness and recognition? Did you have somebody that came and stepped in and kind of kicked the door in, being like, you need to get out of this? What did you have to get you through the quiet, darker times?
Well, my situation is very different. However, I would say it's about purpose. Whether it's a darker time due to a retirement or a darker time due to grief, it's like, where do you want to put that energy? If you allow someone to be in a room and turn out the lights and be in the fetal position and suck their thumb, they're going to do that. But they need to have other outlying activities. So in the grief world, that's what I have worked with a lot. But if you have a widow or widower that has children, children have schedules. They go to school and you have to get them there. They have to be fed. Even if you try not to, they're going to they're going to bother you. They're going to come in. They're going to drag you out of your dark room. You don't have a choice because you have to keep going because you're involved in something. And like retirement, the chance of suicide for a retiree in that first 2 years is dramatically higher than the rest of that pseudo retirement if they stay in that realm, as long as they can figure out how to stay engaged. And whether it's an activity or whether it's showing up to play pickleball on Friday mornings, or you do your coffee on Tuesdays at 7 at whatever place, or you go to this is the older generation of us that'll understand this, but you go to your local Cheers, and I'm not encouraging you to, use alcohol as a resource, but it has less to do with alcohol as it does about camaraderie and having a place to go where everyone knows your name. Cheers, everyone knows your name. And the reality is you walk in and those people, if they don't see you for a while, they're going to wonder where you are. They'll check in on you. because they become friends. And there's so much beauty in that. And I think that whether you're in grief, having a schedule, having an activity, having to, maneuver through that, you're navigating that next chapter, or whether you're navigating your retirement, it's a navigation. You're figuring out how to get somewhere. You're not going in circles, right? You're not a three-legged dog. Just keep going. Just what is the destination? Sometimes we always don't know. But with some patience and guidance and support from your community, you'll get there.
A less popular opinion, and we talked about this earlier, is the importance of balancing your life. We don't hear about the high numbers of suicides in the CPA world, in the dentist world. Maybe some, actually, I think they do talk about that with dentists, but in the general civilian population, because during their careers, they didn't isolate themselves. They didn't only hang out with other accountants. They had a wide breadth of friends and colleagues and associates, so that when they do retire, it's just, I'm not going to that job, but I've still got everybody else that's in my life. For so many of us, we insulate ourselves for 20 or 30 years, and the only people we hang out with are other cops. Well, if you don't all retire at the same time, they keep going, and now you don't have that mission, that purpose to get up and get out of bed every morning. You don't have that social circle that you can go play pickleball with on Fridays because you haven't cultivated it over 20 or 30 years. It's as much as your responsibility to plan and prepare for what you're going to do after your retirement. That includes creating a social circle of people who have your back, and it may not be other police officers.
Well, and
hopefully there's some variety.
Yeah. And for those that are like, well, I don't know what I would do if I'm not doing this. Pay attention to what you do when you procrastinate. What are you scrolling? What videos are you watching? What shows do you like to watch? I caught myself long time ago where I had a job. Fortunately, I was commission only, so I was in charge of my sales. So if I didn't want to talk to anybody and be antisocial, then I wasn't going to make any money, and that's on me. But what I would do is at that point, I was researching things. I love astrology. Like I said, I have a doctorate in metaphysical science. So I laugh about my doctorate because I'm a doctor in woo-woo shit. So that got there because of the things I would do to procrastinate. I would look at astrology. I'd look up, why do people do this? Why do they act like this? What's the spiritual meaning of this? What's the energy behind that? That was my distraction. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something here. This is what I'm naturally gravitating towards. Maybe I should look into that a little bit more on top of what I'm doing. So if you're watching, survival shows, camping, hiking, or whatever, home decorating.
Should you go work at REI if you're doing that?
Yeah. Get
Okay,
the
just
discounts. Cash in on the discounts for a minute.
See?
Sorry, I couldn't help
Well
it.
played, Angela. Well played.
Okay, well, on that note, let me ask you this, Mark. When you did that, what did you learn? Some stuff? Was it your passion project? No. But what were some of the blessings that came from that experience that made you a better person?
Started smoking marijuana.
Right? Yeah. I will say that it gave me it gave me a greater appreciation for the job stability that I had in law enforcement, and that's just always been who from the day I turned 18, I was in boot camp, just spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, and then went right into law enforcement. So I've always had a structured life, right, in that sense. And so getting into going to REI and being in that I don't know what kind of realm you call it, but where everybody's just, you got a lot of irresponsible kids I was working with. That was just, I was biting my tongue a lot. Thank God, I just let me be in charge of this place, and I'll straighten these people up. But then you got to step back. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. That's maybe not what they need. And it gave me a lot of perspective that this company's been around for a long time and it's functioning very well. Why is it because I step in and think that it should be structured the way my life was, that's going to make it better, right? So it gave me a little more relaxed approach to the different things, and also the different personalities of people out there. It helped I don't want to say lower my guard a little bit, let my guard down, but it did. and it was just a little bit of a wake up call,
You
in a
said
good.
let your guard down, but the reality is maybe you just took a breath and you weren't wound so tight. That's a good
That's
thing too. That's a great
yeah,
perspective to earn.
yeah,
And the other thing too is you experienced it. Because if you didn't do that today, you might be questioning. I wonder if it would have been great if I worked for REI and how awesome it would be now. I really missed that vote right years later. So at least you checked it out. You said, not really for me. And then you moved on, right? You moved
yeah.
on to something else. So, yeah, good. I mean, good for you. When I was a teenager, do you guys remember Kmart? You guys remember Kmart?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
loved Kmart. I know it's embarrassing. I know. I loved it as a kid, right? Because my grandmother would take me and I blue light specials and what have you. Like, that was awesome. And then as a teenager, I actually went and worked at Kmart. And before you knew it, I hated Kmart. I didn't want to go there when I wasn't working because I was working there, right? Kind of the same mentality in a weird way. We want to become cops. We want to help people. And if we don't take care of ourselves, before you know it, we hate people. We hate our careers, and then we leave before we even hit 20. So again, it's the mindset, right? You got to have that I'm gonna call it Mark mindset of positivity, right? Really focus on the positive versus the negative, right? And just
Stop,
know,
Tammy.
Well, because the Mr. Positive Mark, except for when we did our training, I put who this training's for, and I had a whole list of things, and I put that it was for salty dogs. And Chris is like, I don't know if we should say that. I'm like, nah, I'm putting on it. And when Mark comes through the door, he's like, we're the salty dogs. We're here. I'm salty. And it's like, you're the least salty person that I know so far.
It takes someone who's not one to be able to say that.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Right? Yeah, there you go.
Well, so one of my point for that question is that sometimes we do things in life, we get put into different positions, different jobs, whatever that is, and we might not like it. Like Chris talks about, he went from undercover into IA and he hated it at the time. However, that IA experience has served him and us so much in so many different facets to make him a better person, to understand, to see things. And I always like everything that we do with our business, we run it through an IA filter to make sure that if we're going to step in and work with a department, we now have a different perspective, even though we hated it at the time. I'm telling your story for you. I always do that, but that's okay. But that served. And then same for me. I have had so many different jobs being like, why am I doing this? What am I getting? And now that I'm running a company, I'm like, oh, I know how to do that. I know how to do I know how to do photography. I know how to talk. I know how to be on camera. I know how to, because I've done it for a minute, but I've done it. So all of the stuff that you're going through is setting you up. It might suck whoever's listening to this, it might suck. You're in the suck of it all right now listening, and you don't think that there's any way out. And I promise you, all of us can share. We've been through some really shitty times in life, very painful experiences, and you will get through it. And it's going to be part of your purpose. We met somebody at a conference, and I won't share too much of the story. They've been shot in the line of duty. Everything's working against this person. They're very young. Just one slap in the face after another, after another, after another. And this person is like, I don't get it. And I was like, oh, hun, like, you're going to be a keynote speaker. You're going to be writing a book about this. You're going to be helping the policies and the procedures. So the shit that's happening to you is not going to happen again, because once you get through your healing journey, you're going to become an advocate and a voice. Like, you just started this journey. And it, like, the whole is like, and it's hard to believe that that's possible when you're in it, can't see the forest through the trees type of thing. But for whoever's listening, you will get through it. And if you choose, you can be victim for the rest of your life and be salty and bitter and retire and be miserable and just wait for whatever and blame the department and blame everybody else. Or one of the things we also tease is anytime there's a finger pointing out, how many are pointing back at you? And I do that. There's sometimes like, that person's being an asshole. And then I'll look and be like, how am I being an asshole? Guarantee there's usually a place where I'm being an asshole, that if I'm going to have that go out into the universe. So this is fun conversation, you guys.
I love this. I think it's great. And I think it comes down to the fact that, we all live this book of life. And every chapter that we're in lead us to the next. And not everything or everyone comes with us into the next chapter, but it's going to be a heck of a book when it's done.
Right? A reason?
So well said. So
Lifetime.
well said.
Yeah. I want to honor everybody's time. So in true fashion of what I do with this podcast is I want to go around, and if somebody were to just tune into this last part, what is your 2-second, 2-minute mic drop moment of the takeaway, the advice that you would give, whether it's for the younger generation, somebody that's already in retirement, whoever that is, who would you like to speak directly to, and what is your message? Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go. When it comes to retirement, for the retiree, don't expect people to reach out to you, right? And don't get your feelings hurt because nobody's reaching out to you. Take the initiative and you maintain that communication. I've been retired. I still reach out to guys who are still working, and we have lunch. If I didn't do that, we probably wouldn't be talking or having lunch together, right? So I take that initiative and I do that to keep that connection there. But at the same time, that part of law enforcement, to me, that chapter, that book is closed, and I'm on a new chapter now, right? And I'm making other friends who might not be in law enforcement, but they're out there all over the country, right? So just because you retire doesn't mean that's the end of your life. It's the beginning of something new. But you've got to take that initiative. Don't expect anybody to reach out to you. Like we said earlier, wellness is not your department's responsibility. It's your responsibility as an individual. It's your responsibility. Who's next?
I will say that for the retirees or about to retire, it gets overused, but find your purpose. Find that next thing that's going to not force you, but make you want to get up and get out of bed in the morning when this career is over. For the younger people, this is not rocket science. It is a wheel that just keeps turning. Every generation is going to experience the same thing. If you think right now it's bad as far as what society thinks about you, go find a cop who was working in the late 60s, early 70s and ask them how they dealt with the public and society. It is cyclical. It all comes around. It's whether you pick it up on the front end of your career or the tail end of your career. But if you do the career long enough, you're going to go through a period where the public doesn't like you. Just ride it out. It'll be fine.
Love that.
I should have went first because these guys stole all my thunder. They're saying all the same exact things. And it's kind of funny how we all have this similar mindset, right? It's from where we came. But I would have to speak to both the young and the older generation as well. Is that what you just try to have that focus and that develop a new passion when you leave this chapter, and you don't have to think too hard about it because it'll just happen if you're just open-minded and you put it out there to the universe. You're going to find a new passion when you retire. And along the same lines as Chris, I same thing. I always go back and attend. I try to anyway. I try to get back to California and attend retirement gatherings and parties and whatnot. And it helps me reconnect with some of these folks like we talked about earlier in the podcast. You're finding out where they're at now, what they've done, and it helps. It may give you a new lease on your retirement if you feel like you're getting into a rut in your retirement. When you look and maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. You look, oh, geez, so and so is the same as they were 20 years ago when we retired, or so and so became even more successful. But keep those connections, like Chris said, and just find a new passion when you retire. Find a new passion, and the rest will play out.
Well, mine is get busy living. We all hang our hat on this idea of retirement or the end of whatever it is. Do you really want to wait to start living in that new chapter? Just get busy living right now, because you never know what that new chapter will be. I mean, you think it's retirement. It might not be. I've had many an officer or firefighter tell me, gosh, I had the opportunity to retire and I didn't do it. And now here I am. Maybe they were hurt. Maybe someone they knew lost their life, whatever it was. But get busy living.
And I love all of that. And I want to piggyback and expand on a few different things. So you guys are saying, find your purpose, find your passion. And when you're not in your purpose, you're kind of lost and you're floating and you don't know. You can't just be like, well, this is my passion. It takes time. You have to explore. You might go take a woodworking shop and you're like, I don't like wood. That's dumb. I don't like to travel here. I don't want, that didn't bring me joy. That didn't bring me joy. That didn't bring me joy. Okay, great. It's not going to just instantly fall into your lap. It's a culmination of time, but you're not going to find it sitting on your couch. You're not going to sit at, video games and doom scrolling and watching the news and all of the, and let me just say this to a lot of you out there. Your passion and your purpose is not to spit your opinion, whatever your opinion is, on social media. That's not, that's a whole nother podcast topic, but that is not.
Wow, that's going to piss off some people.
Newsflash.
Way to go, Tammy.
Podcasts don't count. Okay.
Podcast, that's different. But as you're trying to find that, and I want to say too, there's a difference between passion and purpose. Our ego gets involved in this. We have this big, grandiose purpose. What's my purpose? Your purpose might have been to be at a certain place at a certain time to hold a door for somebody else so that they could go on. Your purpose might have been to, help somebody get off the street that they're going to go and now be a keynote and go help others get off the street or whatever that is. Your purpose isn't like, hey, we're going to be the next big, everybody's going to remember our name. It might have been a little spoke in a wheel of something else. Okay. Your passion is going to get you through the rest of your life. Your passion in exploring that goes back to what you gravitate towards naturally when you procrastinate and what you're doing. That's where you want to kind of lean into what does that look like and how can I cultivate it, if that makes sense. And if you're really not sure and you're really lost, again, reach out. Again, I say it all the time. You can reach out to our law enforcement coaches. They can help you through it. But you can also reach out to all of the guests. Every single guest that I have on here, I personally put my stamp of approval that they will pick up the phone, they will answer their email, and they will have that conversation, whether they're coaches or mentors or whatever that is. If there is somebody that you're like, I really like what you are about, talk to them. Everybody that we have on this podcast is accessible to the masses. I don't want to really put that out there, but within reason, to mentor and help you. And so to wrap this up, one of the things that I want to assign homework to everybody, that's one of the things that I do in my coaching, reach out. Whoever you are listening to this, if you are retired, go check in with somebody in the department that's still active. And when I say check in, I'm going to reiterate this. I can't scream it loud enough. Do not just say, how's it going? How are you doing? Good. No. What's work like these days? What's retirement? What are you up to? What's bringing you joy? And the last little 2-cent mic drop that I want to leave with that is when we focus so much on the negative versus the positive. If you're in the department and you're like, oh, my department doesn't take care of me, they don't like this, I want you to stop. What are they doing well? Because not everything is shitty. It's just your mindset and what you're focusing on. So like what Chris was talking about with the subconscious not wanting to make you a liar, what is your department doing well? What do you like about the person that you hate? Is there one thing you can find that's a little bit positive? Look at your partner. If you're frustrated with your partner or even your kid, if you have a teenager, remember what you like about them. What is something that they do well? Write it pen to paper so that you can see it and focus on it and start retraining your brain to see some of the positives in life. And when in doubt, call Mark. He's positive.
We'll leave Mark's number and address.
Throw it out there. No, I'm seriously. Yeah, that's
awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys all for being here. This was a great conversation. And to the audience tuning in, again, thank you. Reach out, talk, normalize talking, all of the things. And again, until next week.